In ancient Egypt, about 3600 BCE, several citizens bow and chant the name of their ruler, Ensabar-Nur, as he moves towards his pyramid with his 4 horsemen. Sabar-Nur, who is considered as the first mutant to exist, appears aged and prepares to undergo a process that will transfer his mind to the body of a mutant who has regenerative abilities. The process begins once the top of the pyramid is exposed to the sun. But some warriors prepare to initiate their secret plan. Once the transfer begins, the warriors send large slabs of stone into the pyramid in a bid to trap Sabar-Nur inside. The horsemen protect Sabar-Nur from the warriors who are trying to kill him, and the transfer is complete. However, the temple is submerged in the ground, and the last surviving horseman protects Sabar-Nur's body from the falling debris before she's eventually crushed. Back in the present, Scott Summers can't stop itching his eyes in class, and a bully thinks he's checking out his girlfriend. Scott leaves the class and heads to the restroom to try and stop the itching, but the bully goes after him. This ends up being his worst mistake as Scott awakens his mutant powers, which allows him to continuously shoot out kinetic beams from his eyes. The bully gets sent flying into a wall and Scott clenches his eyes. Somewhere in East Berlin, Raven steps out of a taxi and walks into a building where mutants are forced to fight against each other in an electrified cage. Angel, a popular fighter, defeats his opponent and is set to battle against Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler evades Angel's attacks, but Angel lets him know that they'll both be killed if he doesn't fight. This motivates Nightcrawler, who ends up hurting Angel by burning his wings on the electric cage. While this happens, Raven knocks out one of the guards and tampers with the fence's generator, causing it to malfunction. Angel sees the opening and escapes while Ravel helps Nightcrawler escape. Nightcrawler, who has teleportation abilities, teleports them out of the building, and Raven uses her shape-shifting abilities to send the pursuing guards in the wrong direction.
Transform. You're her.
Meanwhile, Eric Lensherr works in a metal factory while hiding his true identity and rounds up for the day. He heads home to his wife Magda and daughter Nina and eventually tucks Nina in that night while singing a song that's been passed down in his family for several generations. Nina wonders what happened to Eric's parents, and he mentions how they were taken from him when he was young. He promises that no one will ever take him away and turns off the light. Back in America, Alex, Scott's brother, decides to help his brother by taking him to Professor Charles Xavier's School for Gifted Children, a school that welcomes, protects, and trains mutants on how to use their powers. While being guided by his brother, Scott accidentally bumps into a telepathic girl named Jean Grey.
Watch where you're going.
I can't.
Jean speaks directly to his mind, and Scott calls her weird while instructing her to stay out of his mind. This upsets Jean, causing her to storm off when Hank McCoy arrives. Alex introduces Scott and asks where Professor Charles is. Hank leads the guests to Charles, who quickly ends the class he is teaching. He is happy to see his old friend.
Alex, it's good to see you.
But Scott isn't too excited as he claims his powers don't feel like a gift. Charles guarantees that what he is feeling isn't out of the ordinary, as everyone is uncomfortable when their powers first kick in. They move their discussion outside as Charles wants to observe Scott's powers. Scott is hesitant to take off the blindfold, but eventually does. He obliterates the target he aims at, but unintentionally destroys a large tree that's behind it. Charles is amazed by his performance and is happy to enroll him at the school. While this is going on, a secret agent observes some men in Cairo, Egypt, and realizes they're members of a secret religious group. She follows the men to see what they're up to and sneaks through a restaurant to find a man standing by a rug. The man refuses to allow her to pass, but she quickly knocks him out and moves the carpet, revealing a secret tunnel to an ancient tomb. The woman, who takes off her disguise and reveals herself to be Moira McTaggart, enters the tunnel and finds the men praying to a strange tomb. Upon closer view, the tomb appears to be the same one that Sabah Nur was buried under. While the men pray, rays of sunlight strike the tomb and awaken Sabah Nur. He uses his abilities to push away the rocks that trap him. This causes a shockwave to spread around the world, and even causes an accident at Eric's workplace. Eric instinctively uses his metal manipulation and control abilities to save a worker who is almost crushed by a large piece of machinery, but pretends to continue working to avoid blowing his cover. That night, several students at Charles' school stare at Jean's room, and Charles instructs them to go to bed. He enters the room, where he finds Jean having a nightmare and tries using his psychic powers to calm her. Charles witnesses what appears to be the end of the world, but eventually helps Jean wake up. Jean tries explaining that what she saw wasn't just mind reading or telekinesis, but a dark power that's growing stronger. She is frustrated as she doesn't think her condition is getting any better, but Charles calms her while assuring her that she'll learn to control her powers.
You will learn to control your powers.
Shortly after leaving Jean's room, Hank explains that something created a great power surge, and Jean is probably reacting to it. Both men head to Cerebro, a supercomputer that helps in amplifying Charles's psychic abilities. Hank provides the coordinates for the source of the power surge, and Charles uses the computer to see what's going on. Charles sees Moira, his old friend and sweetheart, leaving the tomb after barely surviving the shockwave. He reads her mind and discovers that she intends on returning to the CIA headquarters to give a report. Charles plans on meeting her to find out what she knows about the strange shockwave that rocked the entire world. Meanwhile, Eric packs his belongings and informs Magda that they must leave because his cover might have been blown. Magda trusts his decision and goes to get Nina, but doesn't find her in her room. She and Eric rush into the woods in search of her, but find her surrounded by several members of the Citizens Militia. Their officers ask if he is the mutant called Magneto, who is tagged as a killer and monster. Eric confesses that he is and asks the men to let his daughter go. They do as he requests, but Nina gets sad and cries. This activates her mutant abilities, which allow her to control the birds around. The birds attack the officers, and one of them accidentally fires his arrow during the chaos. The fired arrow strikes Nina and Magda, killing them both almost immediately. Eric rushes to his wife and daughter and cries as he realizes they are gone.
Oh, my babies.
The officers stand in shock and fear as Eric holds on to the metal necklace that is on Nina's neck. He uses the necklace to swiftly take out all the officers and yells at the sky in anger.
Is this what you want from me?
Back in Cairo, Sabah Nur walks around and is shocked by just how much the world has changed from what he knew. He notices a mutant girl named Aurora Monroe walking around with a group of children. Aurora uses her powers to cause a distraction before she and the kids steal some items from the traders. The traders pursue her and eventually corner her in an alley. They prepare to punish her for her crimes, but Sabah Nur emerges. He asks who their ruler is, but they can't understand what he's saying because he speaks in an ancient language. More men arrive at the scene, and Sabah Nur takes them out by changing the shape of the wall they are standing beside. The trader is terrified as he sees this, and Sabah Nur ends him by merging him to a wall. Meanwhile, Charles and Alex arrive at the CIA headquarters, where Charles explains that he wiped Moira's memories regarding mutants so she could live a normal life. He makes everyone in the office come to a pause so they can walk through undetected, and they enter Moira's office. Moira is excited to meet Charles as she has read a lot of his work. Charles is shocked to learn that she has a son, but decides to skip the informalities.
You've got a son?
Yes.
Moira is surprised when the duo asks her about her trip to Egypt. She explains that she was tracking some cultists who believe that the first mutant was born tens of thousands of years ago. The cultists believed that this mutant god possessed the power to move his consciousness from one body to another and take on whatever power was in his new body.
An all-powerful mutant.
Exactly.
Ororo takes Sabah Nur to her hideout and he sees a picture of Raven, who the mutants tag as their hero. Sabah Nur sees a television, and upon making contact with it, he begins learning about the new world and its superpowered arsenals.
One of them is held in Boston.
He gains the ability to speak English and tells Ororo that the world needs to be saved. He proceeds to amply her powers, making her his first of 4 horsemen. Elsewhere, Raven takes Nightcrawler to a mutant hideout where she meets Caliban, who runs the facility. Caliban is fond of Raven and offers her information on Eric, who he says has lost his wife and daughter. Raven is shocked to hear this and decides to make a journey with Nightcrawler. Back at Charles' school, Hank hands Scott a pair of glasses that were created to help him keep his powers in check. Scott puts the glasses on and is happy as he can see without destroying everything in his path. He sees Jean sitting under a tree and decides to have a conversation with her. It's here he realizes that most students don't like her because of her uncontrollable powers, and some consider her a freak.
Sorry to break it to you, but you're not the biggest freak in the school.
Hank returns to the building and is left speechless as he sees Raven standing there. Meanwhile, Ororo and Sabah Nur arrive at Caliban's hideout, where Ororo says they are searching for mutants. Caliban pulls out a gun and tries to shoot, but Sabah Nur disintegrates it. He calls Caliban his child, but Psylocke steps in to defend him. Sabah Nur says he needs more mutants like her and amplifies her abilities. This immediately gets her interested in what he has to say, and she offers to take him to the type of mutants he's searching for. Jubilee, a mutant in Charles' school, shows Nightcrawler around the school and he meets Scott, who is interested in going to the mall. Jean thinks it's a bad idea, but Scott convinces her to join them, and the 4 students head out. In Berlin, Psylocke leads Sabi Nur and Ororo to an abandoned warehouse where Angel is drinking his sorrows away. They see his damaged wing and try to leave, but Sabi Nur refuses and offers to help him. Angel refuses, but Sabah Nur is insistent and uses his powers to heal Angel. He also amplifies his powers, making his wings metallic and able to shoot sharp projectiles. Hank speaks to Raven back at Charlie's school and shows her the team jet he's building. He tries convincing her to rejoin the team, but she refuses and says she's back to talk about Eric, who is in trouble. Hank isn't happy to hear that she still thinks about him and says Eric is always in trouble. While this happens, Eric returns to his workplace after losing his beloved wife and daughter. He shuts all the doors, stops all the machines from functioning, and gets the workers' attention. With tears in his eyes, Eric prepares to end everyone.
My name is Magneto.
But is interrupted by Sabah Nur and his horsemen. Eric warns them not to stop him from having his revenge, but Sabah Nur isn't interested in the workers. He proceeds to use his powers to merge the workers with the floor, killing them almost instantly. Sabah Nur asks Eric to join them and transports him to Auschwitz, a place that holds some of his darkest memories. He tags the location as where Eric's powers were born and introduces himself as one who has gone by many names over several generations, and as the person who sets the forest ablaze when new growth is needed. Sabah Nur teaches Eric to feel the metal that's in the earth and how to control the earth's magnetic waves. He offers to destroy everything humans have built so they can rebuild a better civilization. This newfound ability causes Eric to scream as power surges through him, and he obliterates all the buildings around him. Elsewhere, Peter Maximoff watches the news regarding Eric's sighting in Poland and considers going after him. His mother walks into the room and he uses his super speed to change the channel and stand beside an arcade game. Knowing that her son isn't playing games and was watching the news, she asks if he's going after Eric, to which he says he will. She tries changing his mind but can't, and Peter decides to go to Charles' school. Charles and Alex return to their school shortly shortly after, and Moira feels like she has been there before. They enter the building, and Charles is shocked that Raven has returned. He welcomes her, but she denies the school being her home and reminds Charles that people still fear and hate mutants. She points out that a lack of war doesn't mean there's peace. Raven insists that Charles should teach the children how to fight for their freedom and proceeds to talk about Eric, who resurfaced after losing his wife and child. She asks Charles for help in locating him before the rest of the world does, and Charles agrees to do so using Cerebro. Charles, Alex, Raven, and Moira enter the supercomputer, and Moira is amazed by what she sees. They activate the computer and explain to Moira that each light represents all the humans of the world.
Is it all the humans of the world?
The light suddenly turns red, and Charles says they represent all the mutants in the world. He also speaks on how he's connected to all their minds. He eventually finds Eric, who watches as Saba Noor forms armor for his horsemen. Charles speaks to Eric through his mind and apologizes for all the pain he has gone through. He begs Eric to return to the school and seek help, but Eric refuses. He's hell-bent on revenge, and Saba Noor senses what's going on. Excited that he has found a new way to rule the world, Saba Noor taps into Charles' mind and thanks him for unintentionally letting him in. He uses Charles's psychic powers to control Cerebro and prepares to rid the world of their most powerful weapons. Saba Noor controls the minds of various military personnel around the world and forces them to launch the world's nuclear arsenals and superpowers. Every superpowered country reports the same event, and the world powers wonder what is going on.
What the hell's going on?
While this is happening, Hank tries shutting down Cerebro but isn't able to stop what's happening. Charles eventually regains consciousness and tells Alex to use his powers to wreak havoc on Cerebro. Alex proceeds to destroy the supercomputer, which frees Charles but knocks him out in the process. They drag him out of the room but are shocked as Saba Noor, Eric, and his horsemen appear in the school. Eric uses his powers to drag Charles towards him, and Saba Noor prepares to transport them elsewhere. Alex rushes towards them and charges up his heat ray, while Hank tries to stop him. Saba Noor and the others escape, causing Alex's heat ray to break through a door, strike a highly explosive engine, and create an incredible explosion. Just as the explosion spreads, Peter arrives at the school using his super speed and sees what's happening. Peter moves around the school and moves all the students outside while the explosion spreads. Everyone is shocked to suddenly find themselves outside, and the school inn crumbles.
I was looking for the professor. I thought he lived here.
The students are also amazed to see Raven standing before them in her true form. Hank reminds her that they all consider her to be a hero, but she denies being such and reverts to her human form. Moments later, Scott, Nightcrawler, Jubilee, and Jean return to the school, but find only the wreckage. Scott asks about Alex, but Hank tells him that Alex was the closest to the blast and couldn't be saved. This news devastates Scott, and he runs through the debris to find his brother. He begins crying after realizing his brother is really gone. A helicopter suddenly flies towards the destroyed school, and several armed men emerge. Everyone wonders what's happening, but Colonel William Stryker suddenly emerges. Raven instantly recognizes him and tries alerting the others about the incoming danger, but makes her move too late. The soldiers fire a strange cannon that knocks everyone out. The energy wave from the cannon doesn't reach Scott, Jean, and Nightcrawler, and Stryker instructs the soldiers to move some people into the helicopter. They realize they have to help those who were just abducted, and Nightcrawler teleports them into the helicopter. Unknown to them, Stryker activates a strange device that prevents mutants from using their abilities. The helicopter takes off just as the unconscious students begin regaining consciousness. Scott mourns his brother's death while they're in the helicopter, and Jean calms him. She assures him that Alex believes he will achieve great things with his powers and holds his hand. The helicopter eventually flies into a giant hole in a dam and arrives at a secret facility. Sometime later, Charles wakes up and finds himself surrounded by Saba Noor and his horsemen. He tries getting into their minds, but realizes that Saba Noor is using one of his many powers to block him out. He sees Eric and tries reminding him of the good he can achieve, but Eric is hell-bent on having revenge on humanity for all they've done to him.
I've shown him a better way.
Back at the secret facility, Hank and the others wake up and realize they're trapped in a power-dampening cell. Hank reverts to his natural mutant form because he hasn't taken his meds for a while. Stryker talks to them from outside the cell and asks where Charles is. Moira tries explaining that there's a mutant much more powerful than Charles that they should be worried about, but Stryker refuses to believe her. Meanwhile, Sabah Nur instructs Charles to broadcast a message to everyone in the world. Charles refuses and also talks about how he can't speak to everyone without Cerebro's assistance. This doesn't bother Sabah Nur as he decides to use his powers to amplify Charles's psychic abilities. Sabah Nur spreads his news of destruction through Charles, but Charles quietly reaches Jean and gives her his general location. Sabah Nur tells the world of his plan to destroy the world, but Charles asks the strong to protect the weak from what is to come.
That's my message to the world.
Back in the secret facility, Jean tells Scott and Nightcrawler of the secret message Charles gave her. They find the generator room but are shocked to find a strange prison in the room. Jean senses someone inside and notices that a part of the unknown person's mind is missing. 3 guards suddenly barge through the door and enter the room. Jean uses her powers to prevent the guards from seeing them and also opens the prison's door. Several alarms go off as the door swings open and the prisoner slowly steps out, revealing himself as Logan, or the Wolverine. He releases his adamantium claws and goes berserk on the guards. Stryker gets informed that Logan, whom they tag as Weapon X, is on the loose. He watches as Logan runs through the soldiers like they're nothing. This horrific sight completely engulfs Stryker in fear, and he quietly leaves the facility to prevent being Logan's next victim. While searching for an exit, Scott and the others find Logan trying to get out of the facility. He tries attacking them, but Jean goes into his mind and calms him. She takes off some of the equipment on him, and he runs out the door. The trio finds the power-dampening cell, and Scott uses his heat rays to burst the door open. Jean informs Hank and the others that they know where Charles is, and Stryker flies away in his helicopter. As all this happens, Sabah Nur stares at Cairo and recalls how he intended on making it the center of the universe. He continues his plan, and the building suddenly begins deteriorating. The dust that emanates from the city moves towards a vast space and begins forming his new temple, a giant pyramid. Hank and the others arrive at a hangar and find a large warplane. They also find several flight suits, and Raven says it's time they go to war. Back in Cairo, Sabah Nur recreates Eric's iconic helmet and instructs him to use his powers and destroy everything humans have ever built. Charles wonders what his role in Sabah Nur's plan is and isn't aware that he's the most important part of his plan. Shortly after, Eric begins his part of the plan and begins manipulating the Earth's magnetic fields. He begins crumbling buildings, and even metal that's buried at the bottom of the ocean is pulled out. All forms of metal begin moving towards the sky, and several cities begin to crumble. Back in Sabah Nur's temple, the other horsemen place Charles on the same table as the one used for the consciousness transfer. Sabah Nur traps Charles on the table before telling him that he has a chance to rule the world once he's everywhere. This plan can only work if he's everywhere and everyone, and Charles is the key to achieving such goals. Hank and the others arrive at Cairo and are stunned by Sabah Nur's temple. John senses that Charles is in the center of the temple, and Sabah Nur plans on transferring his consciousness into his body to acquire his powers. They also see that Eric manipulates the Earth's magnetic field and decides to split up. Eric continues devastating the world with his powers. And as the team prepares to split up, Scott comments that they don't all know how to control their abilities. Raven encourages them to embrace their abilities instead of trying to control them, and returns to her true form. This motivates everyone, and they begin their mission to save the world. Raven and Peter rush to Eric, while the others make their way to the temple. Inside the temple, Sabah Nur instructs Angel and the other horsemen to protect him until the transference is complete, using his his telekinetic powers, Sabah Nur begins the transference process. While this happens, Jean and the others arrive at the temple's entrance, but are stopped by Angel, who shoots his projectiles at them. John protects everyone while Nightcrawler sneaks inside, causing Angel to follow him. Aurora arrives on the battlefield and prevents the others from entering the temple. A fight ensues, and Psylocke arrives to assist Aurora. Jean senses that the transference has begun and instructs Nightcrawler to hurry up. The battle continues, and the heroes are unable to advance into the temple. Meanwhile, Raven and Peter try breaking through Eric's magnetic field, but aren't able to. Raven tries convincing Eric that he has more family to protect instead of destroying everything. While they're talking, Nightcrawler traps Angel under some debris and rushes to save Charles. He teleports Charles out of the temple and into the warship just before the transference is complete, and teleports the heroes back one at a time. The team attempts to leave the area after saving Charles, but gets intercepted by Angel, who broke free from the debris, and Psylocke. Jean quickly comes up with a risky plan, and Nightcrawler pushes his powers to their limit by teleporting several people at the same time. While this happens, Jean forces the warship to plummet with Angel trapped inside. Psylocke escapes the explosion, but Angel isn't as lucky. Seeing that they aren't making progress with Eric, Raven and Peter decide to return to the fight, and Eric rethinks his decision to destroy the world. Nightcrawler is able to teleport everyone to a damaged building, but passes out from expending too much energy. Sabah Nur appears on the battlefield. Enraged that his plans have been foiled by his incompetent horsemen, he calls out Charles and reminds him that they're still mentally connected. Everything suddenly comes to a stop as Peter uses his super speed to move around Sabah Nur. He begins punching him, which sends him flying around like a rag doll. This upper hand is short-lived as Sabah Nur quickly adapts to his attacks and stops his movement. Peter tries to keep fighting but can't, and Sabah Nur steps on his knee, which breaks Peter's leg and causes him to scream in pain. Psylocke emerges to assist Sabah Nur, but suddenly slashes his throat in an attempt to end his life. Her attack doesn't work as the wound heals immediately, and Sabah Nur grabs her by the neck. The pain and lack of oxygen causes her to revert to her true form and reveal that Raven was pretending to be her. Aurora hides in one of the damaged buildings and watches as her hero is about to be killed by the seemingly unstoppable foe. Charles prepares to sacrifice himself to save Raven's life, but suddenly remembers that he's become connected to Sabah Nur through the transference process. He thanks Sabah for unintentionally letting him into his mind and shows him the full extent of his psychic abilities. Sabah Nur is overwhelmed by Charles' abilities and is unable to retaliate as Charles beats him up in his mental realm. His rapid adaptation quickly sets in and he begins withstanding what Charles throws at him. Charles tries to strike him again, but Sabah Nur grabs his hand and stops the punch with ease. The tables quickly turn as he begins overpowering Charles in his own mental fortress. This also allows him to locate where Charles and the others are hiding, and he disintegrates the building. He begins approaching them while giving Charles a beatdown in the mental world. All hope seems lost as Sabah Nur approaches Charles. To everyone's surprise, Eric decides to do what's right and stands with his former allies. He stops interfering with the Earth's magnetic fields and uses metal rods to signify his defiance against Sabah Nur. Eric fires hundreds of metal projectiles at his new enemy, but they're disintegrating before they can strike him. Hank and Scott rejoin the fight, and Scott fires his lasers at him while Hank saves the injured heroes. Their efforts still prove futile, and Charles calls out to Jean, who still fears using her abilities. The heroes get weaker, and Sabah Nur begins knocking them down one at a time. Charles refuses to believe that his team will lose and puts all his faith in Jean, who finally goes against her fears and stands up to Sabah Nur. She unleashes the full force of her abilities on him, and it immediately shatters his mental control over Charles. Sabah Nur's armor begins to vaporize by the sheer intensity of Jean's power, and he too is unable to withstand it. The other heroes take advantage of this and continue their strike against him. Their attacks are finally able to deliver damage as his protective barrier has been destroyed. Realizing that he needs to escape, Sabah Nur tries teleporting away, but suddenly gets electrocuted by Ororo, who finally understands that he's the true villain and not Charles's team. Jean continues unleashing her unimaginable power on him and completely vaporizes him. The heroes are happy for their victory, but their joy is cut short when Moira is unable to wake Charles.
Charles! He's gone.
They fear that he is dead, but Jean calms them as she can still sense him in his body. She uses her abilities to revive him, calming everyone who sees him as he wakes up. Moira checks to see if he is all right, and Charles decides to return some memories he took from her. She suddenly remembers how he lost his ability to walk and the incidents that led to it. Days pass after the incredible battle, and Eric assists Jean in rebuilding Charles's school. The world tries its best to return to normal, and Charles discusses with Eric about how several countries have begun rebuilding their superpowers. Eric fears that humans pose a great threat to mutant kind, but Charles believes in a better and brighter future. Realizing he can't stay with Charles, Eric wishes him goodbye and leaves as Raven trains the newest set of X-Men to battle against their greatest adversaries, Sentinels.
You're X-Men.
Charles Xavier believed that the world could be a better place for both humans and mutants. His friends and colleagues were scattered across the globe, but made their way back to him when the world needed them the most. Refusing to give up on humanity, they stood against a being of unrivaled strength and came out victorious by what can only be called a miracle. Do you believe that they were right for saving humanity?